What's going on, guys, and welcome to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for January 21st, 2022. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and enjoying your weekend so far. We're 1 week out. Today marks 1 week out from the Royal Rumble, which I'm really looking forward to, as always. The build has not been the greatest, far from it on the SmackDown side of things. We got Rollins and Roman, which didn't really heat up until this past week, which was nice. Specifically this show, which we'll get into. And so with the Rumble being on a Saturday, I will note this real quick. Obviously, I do these SmackDown audio reviews every Saturday for the most part. I'm going to try to do this a little bit earlier next week so we can get it out before the pay-per-view that night. I don't know about Talking Smack, assuming they're doing an episode of Talking Smack this Saturday of the Rumble. They very well may not. I don't think they did one. Did they do one the day of day one? I don't think they did. They might have, and I just don't remember. I'm pretty sure they didn't do one the day of day one, partially because it was New Year's Day, and there wasn't a SmackDown that Friday, so that's why they didn't do one. If they do a Talking Smack before the Rumble, there's a good chance I won't watch/review it until Sunday, so it's probably going to be outdated, but just keep an eye out for that on Sunday. It could be up on Saturday the same time I put up this review for SmackDown. Probably won't be. Usually I try to put those out on Sundays, despite the fact it's going to be outdated, whatever. But here are my thoughts on the SmackDown from last night. Not a great show, which is something I feel like has been par for the course with the Blue brand over the past number of weeks, specifically since the draft. When they lost a lot of star power, and I've been saying this week in and week out in these reviews, so I'll try not to repeat myself or go too in-depth with it at the risk of beating a dead horse here. But between the departure of Jeff Hardy, him getting fired back in December, Tony Storm quitting, Mustafa Ali requesting his release, getting that denied, apparently, reportedly. If it's maybe they bring him back. I don't think they can, or they want to. I mean, they can, obviously, but would he want to come back after requesting his release? At least not right now. It could be a Luke Harper situation where they deny it, they bring him back to TV for a little while, have him lose to a bunch of people, and then they cut him. Who knows? Doesn't sound like they're going to honor that request anytime soon. Why? I don't know. Why they would want to keep him around if they have no intention of using him, I have no fucking clue. They didn't use him prior to this past week, and then all of a sudden, because he said he wants to leave, they're like, no, we'll keep you. That makes no fucking sense to me. I know he signed a contract, and it's like, listen, you got to honor your contract until it's up. I totally get that. But the thing is, if he's not even on TV, and they're not even using him, then just let him go. I don't understand that. Anyway, so between Mustafa, Tony, Jeff, Drew getting hurt, Xavier Woods getting hurt, Sasha Banks getting hurt, SmackDown star power is in the fucking toilet. Which is why they're bringing in all these stars from Raw right now. The brand split be damned. The brand split is basically over. We had 3 Raw superstars on this show. And Michael Cole attempted to explain it by saying, oh, it's Royal Rumble season, you never know who's going to show up where. They were trying to get over that dumb brand-to-brand invitational bullshit about a year or two ago. That was clearly forgotten about because there was no mention of that made on the show at all. You had Seth Rollins show up, which I know he's feuding with Roman, but he wasn't even advertised. They're not even trying to explain why Rollins is able to contend for a SmackDown World Championship. But you have Rollins, whatever. Kevin Owens shows up. How is Kevin Owens allowed to appear on the show if he's a Raw superstar? And then you got Big E, former WWE Champion Big E, coming to the aid of Kofi Kingston during his match with Madcap Moss. So that was 3 Raw superstars, probably in the span of like 25 minutes. Maybe even less than that, because they had the opening segment and then Kingston versus Moss, and that was when Big E came out. So, I mean, again, I know it's a Rumble season, quote unquote. They're not even trying to explain it anymore as to why it makes sense. It did make the show better, but we got a ton of rematches on this show, which is why I call it a very, very mediocre show. Unlike last week, I thought the Reigns and Rollins stuff carried this show. The opening segment was very good. The main event was great. Great closing angle there. Everything in the middle, though, wasn't terrible, but we literally got 3 rematches from last week. I mean, that is the epitome of lazy and illustrates how big of an issue this roster has as far as the depth goes right now, as far as the SmackDown roster depth goes on Friday nights. So, I mean, again, I hate to repeat myself, but it's an ongoing issue and it's only getting worse. People getting released. I mean, they had people like Hit Row, for example, that really could have added to that tag team division or the mid-card division. Someone like an Isaiah Swerve Scott would be perfect in that mid-card title picture right now. Instead, we're left with Nakamura and Zayn, which isn't really happening right now because Nakamura is another one that's hurt. He's the current Intercontinental Champion. That's why we haven't gotten Zayn versus Nakamura yet. That feud's not really lighting the world on fire. We got a surprise appearance from Johnny Knoxville on the show, but again, not enough to salvage this show. So let's get right into it. We open the episode of the Bloodline, who are celebrating Roman Reigns' record-setting reign as Universal Champion. As of today, I believe it's 509 days, breaking Brock Lesnar's record, I think, of like 504 days from 2017, 2018. He held it from WrestleMania 33 through SummerSlam 2018. Roman has been champion since August of 2020. The first calendar-long champion, I think, since CM Punk in 2012 when he was WWE Champion from November of 2013, or 2011 rather, through January of 2013. Roman's reign is even longer than that. I think the only few people to have held the championship longer in this company, I'd have to look back on it. I know Kaylee Ray did. I know Walter obviously did. He was champion for well over 2 years, from April of 2019 through August of 2021. Like well over 2 years. Kaylee Ray was also champion for almost 2 years. Her reign was longer than Roman's. It's really all a matter of when they plan to take the championship off of Roman. I don't think he's losing to Seth Rollins at the Royal Rumble next weekend, but I still maintain they'll probably have him lose the championship at WrestleMania, because if not then when? You know, maybe when they have a better roster, but they're not really in the process of creating any new stars at the moment, so who knows how long that's going to be. I personally have no issue with them keeping the belt on Roman until they figure out a better person to take that title off of him, not named Brock Lesnar, and honestly also not named Drew McIntyre. Drew taking the belt at WrestleMania, if he was cleared to compete, would be a better story, I think, than Brock becoming champion, who's already the WWE champion. He would probably lose that belt before then. I don't want Brock to become the Universal Champion next. I mean, he would be a, fucking 10-time world champion by that point? The guy is also part-time. I love Brock's current character and whatnot. I really, 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 really do not want to see him beat Roman Reigns. Especially for, a second or third time at WrestleMania? Neither of them won at WrestleMania 31, but Brock did beat Roman clean at WrestleMania 34. Roman has beaten Brock a fair amount of times, never at WrestleMania. Haven't beat Brock again at Mania, if that's the end game for this angle, which I assume it is. Have Roman win there, and then just keep the belt on him. Who's going to take it off of Roman? Again, Drew would probably make the most sense, because at least he's full-time. He hasn't won a world championship in front of fans yet, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is to Drew, because he had that moment robbed from him 2 years ago at WrestleMania 36. Failed to regain the championship from Bobby on like 2 or 3 different occasions in 2021. And he also won the championship back for a second time on Raw in late 2020, but there were no fans there to kind of celebrate the occasion or whatever. So anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, but Roman's had a great reign as Universal Champion, and they properly showcased that and highlighted that by showing highlights from his long reign as champion, going all the way back to August 30th, 2020 at Payback, that random one-off Payback pay-per-view a week after SummerSlam that year when Roman returned. 7 days later, winning the Universal Championship in a triple threat match from 2 people who aren't even in the company anymore, in Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt had become champion at SummerSlam as The Fiend, held the belt for all of 7 days. Roman pinned Braun, who I actually saw last night at an indie show here in Connecticut. I've met him before. I've interviewed him before. Very nice guy. So he did not come out to interrupt the ceremony. He was too busy in Connecticut last night. But they did show highlights of him beating Braun to win the championship, although The Fiend was the champion. He just wasn't pinned. They didn't show any clips from the Jey Uso feud, which was disappointing. I know they're on the same side now, but honestly, that might have been the best feud that Roman has had as Universal Champion. And that was the very first feud that he had as champion back in late 2020. And they had some awesome matches too at Night of Champions or Clash of Champions, whatever, in Hell in a Cell. But they did show highlights from his feud with Kevin Owens in late 2020, early 2021. Great matches there. Highlights from his matches and wins over Daniel Bryan at Fastlane, Edge and Bryan at WrestleMania, Cesaro at Backlash, Rey Mysterio inside Hell in a Cell on SmackDown. Not at Hell in a Cell, which was weird. They did it on SmackDown 2 days before that. Remember that? But they did it 2 days before the pay-per-view, which was weird in retrospect, and even at the time. Great match, though. They showed that. They showed him beating Edge and Money in the Bank. They didn't show the Cena win right away. They kind of built to it because they included the clip of Roman saying, "Oh, I've beaten everybody." I've beaten all the biggest stars. And then they showed the Roman win over Cena from SummerSlam. They showed him beating Finn Balor. They showed him beating Sami Zayn real quickly. They showed him beating the Demon at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view in September. They showed him beating Brock Lesnar even, which I didn't think they would show to make sure Brock doesn't look weak, but it happened. He beat Brock at SummerSlam. They showed him beating Big E, albeit not in the championship match, but in the champion versus champion match at Survivor Series. They showed that. And now he's still the Universal Champion all the way back, all the way still in 2022 in January, which is pretty cool. So he was interrupted, obviously, by Rollins, which was a pleasant surprise. I wasn't overly expecting it. I know he's feuding with Roman right now, but he wasn't advertised for this show, which I thought was weird, because if you really want to make people tune into the show, why wouldn't you advertise the guy that Roman's defending that championship against at the Rumble? They advertised him last week, but not this week, which was weird. But anyway, so Rollins comes out. There was a Mox mention. Moxley was in action on Rampage right after this for AEW, but he got a name drop here in this segment. And no, Moxley's not coming out of the Rumble. He's not in the Royal Rumble. Don't get it twisted. But Rollins did say, you have the Usos backing you up, and he was praising the Usos as the longest reigning tag team champions, SmackDown tag team champions ever, which is true. They broke their own record of like 182 days. Now they're champions of 186 days or whatever. So this reign for the Usos, at only 6 months, mind you, is the longest reign in the history of those tag team titles on SmackDown. So anyway, Rollins brought that up and said that you probably wouldn't be champion now if it wasn't for the Usos, and I don't want them ringside at the Rumble. Roman gave him his word, saying that they won't be, and Rollins said, well, your word is bullshit. At a certain time, I may have taken you at your word, not anymore. It's got to be me and Owens, he brought out Owens at that point, versus the Usos later tonight, and they established that if Rollins won, then the Usos would be barred from ringside of the Rumble. If the Usos won, then Rollins versus Reigns at the Royal Rumble was off. So you knew who was winning, but it was nice to have stakes in the main event for a change. So anyway, back to the Mox mention real quick. He mentioned, you have the Usos holding you up and kind of keeping you afloat, a lot like you had me and Mox back in the day in the Shield. He didn't say Dean Ambrose. He didn't say John Moxley, but he did say Mox. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I know John Cena and Roman said something similar. He said, you have John Cena write your promo? You're saying the same stuff about how, you can only do this and that and whatever, which was funny. I wouldn't use the insider terms like promo and shit, but I'd rather deal with that than, I don't want turn heel, like what fucking Cody Rhodes said on Dynamite a few days ago. But it was weird because Cena mentioned Ambrose too, right before SummerSlam last year in those war of words that those two had, mentioning that, you ran Dean Ambrose out of the company. Remember that line? He said Dean Ambrose, which makes more sense because to WWE fans, he's Dean Ambrose. I can only imagine casual fans watching WWE or SmackDown on Fox having no fucking clue who Mox is, because he's never been referenced as John Moxley on WWE TV before. It's cool for people like us who know him as John Moxley. I'm sure there's a lot of people who watch WWE TV who either aren't aware of his work in AEW, just don't know that he even works there or still wrestles or whatever, and definitely don't know him as John Moxley. So I thought that was funny. But a very good segment, though, and far better than the verbal exchange they had last week on SmackDown to close out the show, which at the time I called very underwhelming, and it was. This was much better, setting up the night's main event, the tag team main event, with stakes, which was a nice surprise. Speaking of surprises, I'll mention this now so I don't forget. We had a few WWE Hall of Famer appearances on the show, 2, and then another from a WWE legend, as the WWE caller or the ring announcer, who I think is something Samantha Irving, I think her name was. I think she was in NXT or on 205 Live, and now she's on SmackDown. They called her a WWE legend. I'll get to that in a moment. So we had appearances from Eric Bischoff, who was backstage with Adam Pearce after the whole Sonya Deville thing with Naomi. Cool to see Bischoff. We literally just saw him on Raw a few weeks ago for that wedding segment, the wedding renewal shit with Miz and Maurice right before day one. I think it was the last Raw of 2021. And Bischoff showed up for that. He was the kind of the officiator of the whole thing. And then we also saw later on in the show Jeff Jarrett, who I don't think works there anymore. I interviewed Jeff Jarrett a couple of months ago for What Culture, and we talked about his podcast. Great guy. Got a chance to meet him as well in person right before that. I don't think there was... I know he worked there for a little while as like a either creative writer or a producer. I don't think he's been there for a good year or so. He hasn't been there for a bit. But he did show up. They were in Nashville. I think he lives in Nashville, so that makes sense. He was in a backstage segment with Nakamura and Boogs, and him and Boogs went back and forth. And it was cool to see Jarrett. We haven't seen him on WWE TV in, I don't know, probably since he went into the Hall of Fame, right? 3 years ago? I don't know if he's been on TV since then. Maybe he hasn't, I just don't remember. He's actually going to be at GCW tomorrow. That's what made this so funny to me. It was like when Jericho was on the 25th anniversary of Raw back in 2018, and that was advertised. But the funny thing about that was that he had the long hair. He was wearing like the Omega shirt or the Alpha Club shirt or whatever, the same shirt that I think was from Pro Wrestling Tees. And he had made that shirt after the feud with Kenny. He had just faced Kenny in the Tokyo Dome at Wrestle Kingdom like 2 or 3 weeks before. So we got like New Japan Jericho on Raw a couple of weeks after that, making a short, brief appearance backstage with Elias. And we had this, in not quite to that same level, but we had Jeff Jarrett here. 2 days before, he set the face, I think, Joey Janela at GCW at the Hammerstein in New York City, which is just so incredibly random. As far as the WWE legend we got on the show, we were told that she was from Nashville, which I did not know. Summer Rae. And a lot of people were very upset online, I guess. I think she referenced the reports online, or she responded to the backlash online saying, like, hey, listen, I don't call myself a legend. That was the WWE call. I mean, they called me a legend. Take it up with them, whatever. And then she kind of rolled her eyes in a video that you put up last night. But she was ringside for the Natalya Aliyah match, which was fitting because she and Natalya have gone back and forth on Twitter for a couple of weeks now since they announced Summer Rae for the Women's Rumble next weekend. And I think they had beef. I've seen all the Total Divas episodes. I don't remember their beef. Summer Rae was on that show. It was like a cup of coffee stint. She was on that show very briefly for like the second season. I don't remember the bad blood that she and Natalya had. It was years ago, but apparently they're still beefing. Probably in kayfabe. I'm sure they're friends behind the scenes. But Natalya kind of shot her a glance, which was funny. So I'm glad they kind of played into that. The commentators acknowledged it as well. But yeah, Summer Rae was ringside for the Natalya Aliyah rematch from last week, and they called her a WWE legend. Again, people were very upset about that online. Is she a legend? No. I mean, we've gotten to a point where anyone that's an alumni, they'll call a legend, oh, this person's a legend, that person's a legend. It's not like she's in the fucking Hall of Fame. It's not like they announced her for the WWE Hall of Fame. I wouldn't classify her as a legend. Would I classify her as a WWE star? Yeah. Anyone who appears in WWE is technically a star, quote-unquote, because they refer to all of their wrestlers as superstars. So to refer to her as a former WWE star makes sense, especially since she was on TV for so long. I mean, she was on the main roster for, 4 or 5 years, between NXT and then the stuff with Fandango and then being on her own. She was with Dolph for a little while in 2015. I think she got cut in 2017 after being out for like a good year with like a neck injury or whatever. And she's in the Women's Rumble next weekend. So, I mean, I got a good laugh when they called her a legend, because I don't know if I would go that far. But it's not something I got upset over, like, oh, why the fuck would they do that? Like, I'm not going to tweet her calling her, oh, you're not a legend. Like, who gives a shit? I'm sure, obviously, again, that wasn't her idea. But anyway, we got appearances from Summer Rae on the show. We heard from Eric Bischoff and Jeff Jarrett as well. So that made this show more newsworthy than it probably would have been otherwise, because this was a very middle-of-the-road show, beyond the Rollins and Reigns stuff, as they mentioned earlier. Our first match on the show saw Kofi Kingston take on Madcap Moss, and our first of 3 matches on the show from last week. Bit of a better match, more energy. Kofi brought out Big E from the get-go. One thing that bothers me to a very small degree is that Xavier has his own music because he's the king of the ring. Big E has his own music and has for a good year now as a former Intercontinental and WWE champion. Kofi Kingston does not come out to his own music. I think they should save the New Day's music at this point, since they're not all together as a trio and haven't been for a while, aside from that one-off week a couple of months ago on Raw when they faced the Bloodline. I would save the New Day music for when, Xavier and Kofi team up. And I think they teamed up, or they were together on TV a few weeks ago, and they came out to Xavier's theme, which was cool. But I'm talking more about, if Kofi's coming out on his own, I don't know if you can bring back the SOS theme or give him a new theme. I don't know if they can. I don't know. I don't think he wants to use the SOS theme. I asked him about a year ago in an interview, and he kind of made it sound like that was the days of old. Like, he likes the song, but that's not who he is anymore, and I get it. It fit the whole Jamaican character perfectly. He hasn't been Jamaican on the show in a decade, well over a decade, so I could see why they wouldn't want to use that. But I thought they were working on a new theme for him when he was WWE champion a few years ago, and they axed it. Maybe, I don't know, it's just a small thing, but I think it'd be cool if they saved the New Day music for the New Day as a team and gave each individual member their own music. like they already did with Xavier and Big E. And Kofi was the first WWE champion of the three. But he beat Moss here, got his win back from last week, as he should have. The issue is, first of all, Moss isn't awful. He's just mediocre. He's just not that good. Second of all, it's impossible to take the guy seriously. He looks like a fucking idiot out there with what he wears, which I understand is the point, but then you can't have him in there being all competitive with a former WWE champion. And third of all, he shouldn't have beat Kofi in the first place. I said that last week. It was a joke for him to beat Kofi Kingston. At least Kofi got his win back, but it should have never gotten to this point. We are getting Kofi and Big E next week reuniting as the New Day, taking on Moss and Corbin. The Corbin and Moss stuff is just so fucking bad. Happy Corbin, the whole poker thing doesn't really bother me. The bad laugh shtick got old a while ago, if it was ever really over or good to begin with. It just fucking sucks. Cole did mention during this match, Corbin was ringside. We don't see Corbin in action all that often. If he is, he's typically in a tag team match with Moss. But we were told that Corbin has not been pinned or submitted since he became Happy Corbin over the summer. So he has gone, undefeated. He's probably lost a tag team match here and there. But they said that he has not been pinned or submitted. I mean, is that true? Was he not pinned or submitted at Survivor Series? Was he counted out? Was it? I don't know. Maybe he's talking about one-on-one. I thought he was pinned or submitted at Survivor Series. I could be wrong on that. But I thought he was, because I'm pretty sure he was on Team SmackDown. Anyway, but they said that, and I'm like, it really sounds like they're trying to protect Happy Corbin, which makes me very fucking scared that we're not getting the McIntyre-Corbin match, not at the Rumble, because McIntyre's not cleared, but rather at WrestleMania. Good Lord, that sounds awful. That sounds like the Drew Jinder treatment from SummerSlam of last year, where it was just a filler feud to keep McIntyre busy, keep him rolling with wins, but it wasn't befitting of SummerSlam. This is the exact same thing. Someone he has history with, has never really had great matches with. I have no desire to see that whatsoever, so I really hope that's not the direction they go in. I would rather Drew take the title from Roman in the main event than Drew being fucking, wasted away in a match with Corbin on the show. I like Corbin, but that is just a waste of both guys. It's not a fresh feud. It's not exciting. We've seen the match a million times. It means nothing to beat Baron Corbin at this point. That is clearly a placeholder program if I've ever seen one. So hopefully that's not the direction they're going in, although I fear it is, depending on when McIntyre is good to come back. Hopefully in the Men's Rumble, but no guarantees there. Our second rematch from last week saw Natalya take on Aliyah. Aliyah beat Natalya last week in a record-setting 3.17 seconds, they said, or whatever, the shortest match in WWE history. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, because it takes a 3 count 3 fucking seconds, right? I mean, it's not like she was immediately already rolling her up when the bell rang. I don't know. I don't know if it is the shortest or not. You would have to tell me. I didn't exactly time it last week. But Aliyah won here, again, by disqualification. Natalya did the whole kicking too much ass finish, that lame, dumb finish they do, where she's beating her up in the corner too often, and then they go for the bell. They call for the bell because Natalya was kicking too much ass. I didn't care about this at all. It was just too short to really mean anything. Not that they wanted a 5 or 10 minute classic out of these two. I think Aliyah is just not that good at all. Natalya just bores me to fucking tears. So a feud between these two women does nothing for me. The only good thing about this was that Xia Li finally came out afterward. I don't know where the hell she's been, but they were hyping her up for weeks and weeks and weeks. She finally debuts, had a pretty good debut, saving, I think, Naomi from Sonya or whatever. And they may have done another vignette for her, but that was like a month or two ago, and we haven't seen her since. She definitely has not been on all year. She was not on towards the end of last year, and she finally resurfaced now. I think her debut was in December, because that's when I interviewed her. But anyway, so she finally came out here, saved Aliyah from Natalya, and that was that. So I'm fine with the Xia Li Natalya mini feud to get Xia Li rolling here, give her a couple of wins over an established talent. Again, Natalya does absolutely nothing for me. Aliyah, she's just not good. I mean, why would you let go of women like Mia Yim and Ember Moon, Tegan Nox? I mean, I can go down the list of all the women they've let go lately. I mean, Nia Jax notwithstanding, she was never any fucking good, but at least the women that were talented. Shotzi's not even on the show. Where the fuck has Shotzi been? It's just weird. Shayna wasn't on the show, but you have TV time for Aliyah? It's weird to me. The Viking Raiders versus Los Lotharios. The Raiders won this one. Fine, fun little match, but again, too short to really be anything out of the ordinary. They're really trying to get the Viking Raiders over and establish them as a threat to the Usos tag team titles, which I'm all for, and I said that last week. The problem is that they should have been doing this from the get-go. When they drafted the Raiders to SmackDown in the draft back in October, they should have started then to build up the Raiders as a real threat to the Usos. I know they were doing the New Day feud for a little while, but they have not given Viking Raiders any real momentum up until last week. Like literally the week before last week when they became number one contenders, and I ranted about this last week, at the show that I was at 2 weeks ago, they literally had the Viking Raiders lose in like 2 or 3 minutes to a non-team in Corbin and Moss, who weren't even in the number one contenders fatal 4-way last week. How much fucking sense does that make? I know they don't book even a week or two ahead, but that is just terrible booking. And then you wonder, why aren't these guys over? Because you've given people no reason to give a shit about them. And that's the company's fault. But then they'll blame it on the talent, saying they're not over because they're not good. And then they'll release them. It's a never-ending cycle. Again, this was fine and fun for what it was. I like Los Lotharios a lot. They were another team they were actually pushing for a little while and haven't pushed since when they first came to SmackDown. But it makes sense to go with the Raiders because Los Lotharios are heels, and unless you're doing a heel versus heel tag team title feud, which I wouldn't do that right now, the Raiders just make more sense. And I don't know if we've seen the Raiders versus the Usos, and if we have, it hasn't been a whole ton. So I'm fine with them being built up as the contenders, but they should have started a while ago is the thing. We then had Charlotte Flair versus Naomi. Another rematch. This was not a rematch from last week. It was a rematch from 2 weeks ago, which I was fine with because I liked the first match a little bit. This was given no time. It was more of an angle than anything. Charles Robinson was supposed to be the referee. I don't know if Robinson is there every week and I'm just missing it, or if he was just there for this match. I don't know. But Sonya Deville came out and took over the refereeing duties from Charles and obviously fucked over Naomi. The match went all of 2 or 3 minutes. Naomi clearly had Charlotte pinned at one point, but Sonya was selling on the outside or pretending to be hurt or whatever. And then when Sonya got back in the ring, Charlotte locked in the figure 4, and Naomi never tapped, but Sonya called for the bell anyway, which is, I thought, the finish that we would get 2 weeks ago, but we didn't. So anyway, they had Charlotte win. Naomi was fucked over again. They gotta, I don't know what they're gonna do to switch things up. They've been doing this feud for so long, and we still don't know why Sonya has it out for Naomi. And they're referencing that on TV. It's gotten to a point where I feel like people just don't care because it has been so long without an explanation. And it's not like I hate the whole, just let it play out thing. Because this company specifically has no track record of ever letting things play out and having them make sense. I mean, even as recently as like the Karrion Kross bullshit. I mean, let it play out. It's going to make sense. They fucking fired the guy. Let what play out? Is it still playing out now? Like, that just makes no sense to me. I'm not going to let it play out because unless they have a good idea of where this is going or have faith that it's going to end well, then I'm not going to let it play out because that's just bullshit. They just tell you that to keep you quiet. They'll probably do Naomi and Sonya at WrestleMania at this point because if they're not doing it at the Rumble, I know they're doing it next week. Why would they do it next week and blow it off next week if you got a pay-per-view the next day and WrestleMania is right around the corner? If you're going to save it till Mania, and that's fine, you got to come up with new ways to be creative with it because now it's getting to the point where it's the same shit every fucking week. And again, I would not blame the fans for not caring because they're booking the same shit with these two women and really dragging it out when it's like you're taking a 2 or 3 month long feud and dragging it out over 6 months, 7 months even, because this started back in August or September. And they've done it every week since then. I'm glad the women are getting time. That's great. But they're already advertising another match for next week, and Adam Pearce is like, well, I won't let you, blah, 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 blah. Where the fuck was Adam Pearce all the other times when Sonya was screwing over Naomi? That's my question. I was asking that a week or two ago. Other people probably longer. So what is stopping them from doing another angle with those two women next week where, they've advertised 2 matches with them already. I think one in October, maybe one last week when they did the whole Xia Li thing. And we're getting our monthly match between the two that's not actually a match. But Sonya never got physical, really. So are we going to get an actual match next week, but it ends in a fuck finish? Do we even get the match? That's the question. I don't think we do. I don't know why you would advertise that if you have no intentions of delivering on it. It's like the boy who cried wolf type of thing with this company. I like the feud. Again, it's been a great use of Naomi. She's gotten more TV time in the last 6 months than she probably has. I'm not even kidding, the last 5 years. I mean, they have barely used this woman in the last 5 years, and she's not bad. Naomi's pretty good, and she's connected with the audience. I could do without the glow stuff at this point, but she's still pretty popular, and I like the fact that she's being showcased. The storyline itself is really wearing thin. And they got to either get to the next step or just blow it off or whatever. Because I don't know if they can continue doing this for the next 2 months and find more ways to be creative, which I know this company struggles with in 2022. Johnny Knoxville showed up, crashing the latest In-Zayn segment. Last week's was kind of funny. This was just stupid. Zayn was out there attempting to electrocute himself for like 5 or so minutes. This went longer than any other match on the show except for the main event, which is just stupid. All the other matches went like 2 or 3 minutes. This one like 5 or 6. God bless Sami for always making the most of everything he's involved, and God bless the guy for reportedly re-signing with WWE as of late, recently. Good for him. But these segments are very hit or miss. This was not good. This went on for way longer than it should have. The crowd didn't know how to react. Knoxville coming out, I don't even want to say salvaged it. I mean, it's cool that Knoxville is even appearing on SmackDown ahead of the Rumble. It would have been very easy for them to say, hey, watch his new movie, Johnny Knoxville will be in the Rumble, let's film these promos. No, he's been on SmackDown twice now. I don't know if he'll be on next week, but, I mean, that's probably more appearances than Drew fucking Carey made before the 2001 Royal Rumble 21 years ago, So, anyway, they tried at the end there. This went on for a little bit longer than it should have. It's nice how they're utilizing Sami and Johnny, but this was not a good segment, I wouldn't say. Our third rematch from last week. I mean, technically the fourth rematch, but Charlotte and Naomi was from 2 weeks ago, not last week. Our third rematch from last week, fourth overall, saw Sheamus take on Ricochet. And they had a very good match last week. This got almost no time. Ridge Holland was back by ringside, back in the corner of Sheamus. Don't think he factored in at all. Sheamus just won clean again, and that was it. I mean, it's better than doing 50-50 booking. Ricochet's a fucking loser at this point. Sheamus, they're keeping his momentum rolling. They've mentioned this on the talk shows like Talking Smack. They haven't really mentioned it otherwise. But Sheamus won the 2012 Royal Rumble literally 10 years from the day of this year's Rumble. And not only that, in the same fucking city. He won it in St. Louis 10 years ago. And they're going to be in St. Louis next weekend as well. I mean, that's just crazy. That is wild. I'm not saying he should win the Rumble, but that is crazy. On a side note, we're going to have an interview with Sheamus next week here on the channel. Looking forward to dropping that video interview as well. Sheamus is awesome, so keep an eye out for that here on the channel at some point next week. But this was a nothing match. I mean, I enjoyed their match last week much more than this. This was way too short to really be anything out of the ordinary. The main event was the best part of the entire show. Seth frickin' Rollins, as they're calling him now, which is so cringy, and Kevin Owens taking on the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Usos, in a non-title match, but per the stipulation, as I said earlier, if Rollins and Owens won, the Usos would be barred from ringside at the Rumble for Roman versus Rollins. If the Usos won here, then Rollins versus Reigns at the Rumble would be called off. That was obviously not going to happen. It was a predictable outcome, but it didn't matter. The match was great. Rollins and Owens played the role of babyfaces very, very well, exceptionally well. The crowd was very into this. The action was great, entertaining, exciting, excellent. I really enjoyed this, as you could tell. And then, I hate DQ finishes in the main event, but it made sense to have the Usos lose by DQ here and not get pinned. That would have been stupid to have them lose to, I don't want to say a makeshift team, but they are a makeshift team, and they're not going to get a title shot, so why would you do that? So Roman coming out, attacking Rollins at the end with a Superman punch, made sense. I didn't have a big issue with that. And it was fine. So it was, the match itself was great. They put more heat on the Rollins and Roman's feud, which I appreciated. Rollins is totally the babyface in this feud, although his mic work can be fucking obnoxious at times. He's been doing good work with the character. And, I thought it was a great way to close out what it was a very mediocre show. I caught this show last night upon getting home from the indie show, which I had a fun time at. But, this show was not worth watching at all. I mean, the appearances backstage from Bischoff and Jarrett were cool, and Summer Rae showing up in the, ringside or whatever to promote her appearance in the Rumble next weekend. That was nice. I can't really point to anything on the show that's worth going out of your way to see beyond the main event in the opening segment. That is literally it. Everything in the middle was just rematch city and way too short to really be anything good. So that was SmackDown in a nutshell. Nothing too surprising there, given the state of SmackDown for the last couple of months now. But it is disappointing knowing how good this show was, how good the Blue Brand was around this time a year ago, a year and a half ago, even 6 months ago. Even 6 months ago. Like going into SummerSlam, even coming out of SummerSlam. That SmackDown that I went to in Madison Square Garden back in September was one of the best shows I've been to in forever. And it was a TV show. It wasn't even a pay-per-view or whatever. It was a great show. And SmackDown has really fallen off since then, which is unfortunate. Thank you guys for checking out my Friday Night SmackDown review for January 21st, 2022. I appreciate it. Like I said earlier at the start of this review, going to aim to do the review a little bit earlier next week before the Rumble that night, which is crazy to think it's coming up in a week from now. But yeah, I'll aim to do the review a little bit earlier next week. I don't think Talking Smack, my review of it's going to be up before, if they even do one. I assume they will. I don't think that'll be up before the pay-per-view. That'll probably be up Sunday, but we'll play that one by ear. And Talking Smack for this week, that review is going to be up tomorrow here on the channel, so stay tuned for that. And my interview with Sheamus from earlier this week, conducted it back on, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. I think it was Tuesday. That's going to be up at some point next week as well. So until then, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I'm Graham Giason Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.